Hi, and welcome back to the Canary Room, episode 13, season 3 of the show. Another action-packed show. Thanks everybody for the feedback from the last episode of the show. Very, very much appreciated. Coming up today, we've got top tips. So we've got ringing the British, so some of the top tips for that. And we've got the selection process of the fifes, the first selection process. So that's coming up in our top tips. The special segment of the show today, thanks to Dave Coughlan of the Natives in Norwich Facebook page. Dave has very kindly sent over some details around muelling. So that's it's a really interesting part because I didn't do it. So that's coming up later today. We've got Bird of the Week. We've of course got the Red Pole Diaries, and we've got question time. Thanks everybody for your questions and the questions that you've sent into the show. We've got some thank yous, of course. Massive thank you to Chris Harrison for your very generous donation, and of course to Michael Burling for yours as well, and a big shout out to everybody who is sharing the page, the different canary groups all over the globe. Massively appreciated, and especially to Indy Rose Burling, who I saw a picture of Indy watching the Canary Room with her dad. Apparently she's a canary breeder in the making. She has a little white canary called Aurora. I'm not sure if that's got anything to do with Frozen or not. Who knows? I'm sure one of the kids will tell me. As always, grab yourself a cuppa. I've got mine here. Sit back and enjoy the show. It's been another eventful couple of weeks in the Canary Room since you were last here. We're into the final stages now as we're into July of canary breeding. We've got a number of nests of young that have hatched out over the last couple of weeks. We've got some young here from the old pair, the old hen. We've got some greens that you can see, some darks that should be nice. The blue cock has hatched, or his hen has hatched a nest of 4, and we've got another couple of chicks off him as well from the dark buff hen. So perseverance has really paid there. She's, she had a number of dead-in shell for us, but we've kept going, and that's, that patience, perseverance has paid dividends, as it has, I'm pleased to say, with the white. So the white hen she's in the sort of flight cage now with the rest of the hens and a couple of cock birds, but she's paid dividends as well. So far, 2 eggs we got off her, both were full. Both have hatched, both are cinnamon, both therefore must be hens. So there's one which is probably about 4 or 5 days older than the other, just because of how I set the eggs. That looks like a variegated cinnamon. The other one is only a few days old, and that looks like it's going to be an allied to white. So whether it'll have any fawn markings on it or not remains to be seen. But obviously we've got to get it out of the nest first and foremost. So a few hens that are that are just hatching. We had a couple of hens leave nests. Weather over the last 2 weeks has been really, really strange. We had some really hot days, super hot days. I bought a couple of sprayers, and I was coming into the room every hour or so and just spraying the air, just trying to keep the humidity levels at the right level. Unfortunately, we have had some dead-in shell, which is probably to be expected. The boarders only hatched one of their 3 full eggs, and I fostered that away, but it hasn't made it. It's also taken its toll, the heat on some of the British birds, and we'll see a bit more of that later on. So we're down to the final few nests. I've been doing a little bit of topping up as well with the birds. I want to try and get as many of these young as I can on the sticks. So that's really the sort of, the final knockings. I have a couple of hens still down on eggs. So I've got the heavily variegated buff hen. She's down on eggs, 2 full eggs with the cinnamon cock. The Agat mosaic hen has started to lay again. She's got the, one Siberian. She's reared 1 Siberian goldfinch to sort of out of the nest. It's not feeding itself yet, so we don't count it as yet. And then I've got another variegated yellow hen just in the cage down here behind me, and that's on a couple of eggs. I've not checked those to see if they're full, but I know the eggs under the hen with the cinnamon cock, they're definitely full, because I checked them earlier this morning. So I've kept a couple of canaries sort of interested, because one of the things I want to make sure is that, if the Siberian eggs hatch and there's 5 laid, there's 5 full, if I need to, I've got some foster canaries hanging around to be able to look at that and sort that out. So real, coming to an end, conclusion really of the canary breeding season. It's been, a phenomenally good season. All in the mosaics have reared some young for us, which is great. Disappointing with the Norwich, disappointing with the Scotch, but there'll be another year for those, I'm sure. Well, certainly not in my canary room. They won't with the Scotch, but with the Norwich, we'll build the Norwich for next year. So that's it in terms of the breeding season. It's really the last knockings of it now, and what I thought I'd do is I'd show you now some of the young from the blue nest without any blues in it. So let's take a little look at them. So first up from this pair is a variegated yellow. Now I'm not 100% sure. I've got a feeling it's a cockbird. I'm not 100% certain, but there's a fair amount to like about this bird. Still very early. I could do with seeing it sort of get a little bit cleaner in the neck, but I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. So there's 4 birds in this first nest. There's 2 in the second, and then there's another 4 in the final nest. And it looks like in that nest there's another blue, certainly another 2 blues, and another 2 variegated. So we'll see how they develop. But this is the first one up. We first met it on the day it was born, and we followed its life through the first 30 odd days or so on the show. So it's variegated. Next up is a heavily variegated from the same nest. So here we've got the heavily variegated. Sweet little thing, this. Really is a sweet little bird. It's not showing itself brilliantly, but it's got a nice rise above the beak, and I think once this bird's fully molted out, I think it certainly deserves a right to have a really close look at it. Also in the nest we had a clear, and we had a ticked to 10% bird. So without further ado, let's have a quick look at those now. So here we've got the clear bird. The clear bird is, I think it's going to be a cock. Nice bird. I really like this early on, and then one of the things I'm sort of mindful of with the blue is it's a stunning bird, but I could do with it just having a little bit of a better break in the neck, a little bit more cleanliness in the neck. I've got some really nice clear yellow hens I've bred this year that have got that sort of almost over-exaggerated neck, so he may get a run at those. But I want to see what he's produced already in the sort of selection of some birds over on the far wall. He's got a couple of youngsters in there already, and I'm sure as we free up a few more cages, he'll have 1 or 2 more. So that was the clear, and then finally is the ticked bird. Again, there's a fair bit to like about this. It's always difficult to review birds in nest feather. You know, when we go into top tips a little bit later on, I'll share with you some of the things that I'm looking for as part of my first review, and some of the features that I'm looking for. So final bird is a ticked. There are blues. As I say, we saw them when they were first hatched. We followed their journey, you know, day by day by day, and now we see them as they're sort of just coming towards the molt. It will be hugely interesting to see how those blues turn out. Always very difficult when you sort of first put them in a cage and sort of put the camera on them straight away. But it's part of our selection process. So without further ado, it's time for this week's top tips. One of the things, we've moved a large number of the adult birds from the main cage block behind me here. We've actually got 6 rows of cages, and the adults now, as you can see from the footage here, they're on the very bottom in a treble breeding cages. So that's 48 odd inches long, a bit longer, 50 inches long. And I'll leave them there for the time being, and I'll do the selection of them, and I'll move them around. I've not put all of the birds in there. I certainly wouldn't put all of the birds in there. A number of the cockbirds have already been singled off, those that have got an important role to play in the stud next year. So the allied to white cock is on its own, the heavily variegated buff cock is on its own, and I must say a massive thank you at this point to Shane Evans of Direct Bird Products. Shane has passed over some of this, which is something called Micro Resp, and I used it on the old buff cock, the red ring buff cock, and I used it also on a red pole cock. And red pole cock was you know, really sort of gaping. Followed the instructions, and wow, is all I can say. Absolutely incredible. We see the footage of both birds here, you know, both right as rain after a treatment. So Shane, thank you very, very much for that, mate. Very much appreciated. And if you have, you know, birds that are struggling with anything respiratory, then, you know, give this a go. I've used it and I think it's fantastic. Back to our top tips. That was one of them. So back to our top tips then, and it's the selection process. What you can see behind me here in the Canary Room is, as I was saying before, there's essentially 30 cages, and what I've done is I've got the clear birds on the top, so 2 rows really of clear birds, some ticked and lightly variegated birds, and then I'll have variegated, heavily variegated, a row of sort of self birds, and then some cinnamons and some allied to whites. So what I've done is I've structured the cage setup to mimic the classification setup basically for the shows. The selection process is something that takes a significant amount of time, and there's 3 key things at this stage that I'm looking for. Birds will inevitably change. So they will change the way that they look as they go through different stages through the molt. Certain birds look great in stock cages, but don't show themselves. And those aren't really birds that you want for the show team. You want a bird that looks average in a stock cage and, you know, and really shows itself in a show cage. So my 3 tips. So first thing I'm looking for is size. Fife is a diminutive bird, so 4 1/4 inches. Difficult to get, you know, a buff cock really at that size, but, you know, that's our aim. That's what we try to do. So the first thing I'm looking for is size. I'm looking for small, round, you know, nicely shaped birds. Now, fortunately, the vast majority of the fifes in the Canary Room fit that criteria. So I certainly haven't bred any this year, any sort of what you'd describe as oversized birds. The second thing I'm looking for is a good rise above the beak. So where the beak is, you're looking for a good rise. Sometimes some of the birds can be a little bit flat-headed, so there's not enough sort of head above the eye, and that sort of starts the bird off, really. The head is really the first thing that certainly I, as a judge, will look for. You look for that really good, clean head. And then the third thing that I'm looking for is that nip in the neck. So I'm looking for, certainly at this stage, I want to see that break in the neck, a good clean neck on the bird. If the bird hasn't got one at this stage, the chances of them developing it through the molt, it's a possibility. But really, you're looking for that freeness in the neck now. And then the final thing at this time of the year that I'm looking for is steadiness. Now, you can train birds, and we'll look at how we train the canaries over the course of the weeks and months ahead, but you absolutely can train them, but there's an inbred steadiness to a bird. What I want to do is be able to put a bird in a show cage, and for to be able to walk around with it, to be able to move it around, and for the bird to stay pretty steady. So those are the criteria that I'm looking for. I've probably singled off, I've got a couple of cages with nestmates in, so there's 2 in a cage. I've got 3 of those. I've probably singled off about 20-25 birds at the moment. Still a few more to come. I know there's birds, over here still that I've not properly looked at. My ambition, my aim was to do all this at the end of July. I noticed there was a couple of the birds that were just a little bit off colour. And that's one of the challenges you've got, if you're housing 6 and 7 birds together. It can be hard to see birds that aren't feeling themselves. And one of the things that's important is you catch birds early so you can treat them. I've given them some Prolite C, those birds that have been a little bit under the weather. So we'll see how they get on. But the birds in the individual cages here, they've got egg food in finger drawers, though they're enjoying that. So that's our first top tip. It's the selection process. So to recap, first and foremost, we're looking at size, then we're looking at head, then we're looking at the nip in the neck, that break in the neck, then we're looking at steadiness. And as these birds develop, we'll keep looking at them, and we'll keep reviewing them, and we'll move birds from this side of the shed over here, and some of these birds, as they develop, will move back across. That's our first top tip. Our second is ringing British. Now, I filmed this a while ago and meant to add it into the show, and was basically completely unsuccessful. So this is filmed a couple of weeks back now. So first thing we do is we take the rings. We can see us ringing some red poles here. We take the rings and we cover them in plasters. So you can see they're almost the skin-coloured plasters. And we wrap them round. We sort of cut them to size. We wrap them round the plaster, and then we ring the bird just as we would do a canary. So the 3 toes forward, the 1 toe at the back. The challenge with the British finches is you have to ring them at sort of 4, 5, 6 days old, and they grow very quickly. And obviously, if you miss them, then you can't sell that bird. You can only gift it. So fortunately, I've rang the Siberians this year, and I've rang the red poles that we've got, so they've all got their proper rings on. So that's our top tips. We've talked about the red poles, we've talked about the Siberians. It's time for Red Pole Diaries. Well, it's been another frustrating couple of weeks. I was looking for the right words there. frustrating couple of weeks with the Red Poles in the Red Pole Diaries, and also with the Siberians. So just to bring you up to date, last time we had the silver pole laying, we had the pied pole laying, and we had the Isabel pole laying. I put a clutch under the pied pole, but it looks like of the, I think, 7 eggs under it, that there's only one full, which is quite disappointing. I know she'd been mated. I know the Isabel had been mated as well. The Isabel has laid a couple of eggs. I think she's laid 3 this time, but no real indication that she's going to sit them. The silver pole has laid a couple of eggs and then started to build a nest over those eggs. So we're beginning, early July, really early to middle July. So, I mean, the British will breed right the way through till August. But I'm sort of, I really want to wrap things up. 1st of August, I changed the lighting in the, or normally change the lighting in the Canary Room, so I'll put my winter lighting on then. So I don't really want to breed them into August. May do. Let's see how we get on. But beautiful little birds still, aren't they? And they're not easy to breed. Certainly, I haven't found them easy to breed. But the rewards when you do get young away are fantastic. We can see that we've got just one Siberian under the with the gap mosaics. I think that's going to be a Umo split Lutino. It's certainly not a Lutino. So that would mean that we've got one Lutino and one Umo. She is on 5 full eggs, the Siberian. Now, I've left them under her. The cock is still with her. I haven't caged him off yet. They are due to hatch in the next week or so, just under a week. So I'll keep an eye on them. I'll keep an eye on and see what happens there. Ideally, I'd like her to rear them, if that's at all possible. I really want to get her sort of, understanding that that's, her role is to feed her own young. Won't be the end of the world if I can't, because I'll foster them out. I've got a couple of canaries still down that, have done good for me so far. So hopefully they'll come into play. The hot weather did take its toll, and despite the fact that I sprayed and sprayed and sprayed, I lost the pea-throat goldfinch hen, and I was gutted, absolutely gutted. I've only got one pair of normal goldfinches. I've got one sort of Siberian cock and 2 what I think, certainly 1 Siberian hen and what I think is a second Lutino Siberian hen. Obviously with the 2 Siberians that I've bred this year, if I'll send them for send feathers for DNA testing, and if one of those is a cock, then I'll pair it with the other Siberian hen, the Lutino Siberian hen. And then what I'll look to do is, if I can get any sort of another 2 or 3, maybe move 1 or 2 on, but try and swap one. And try and make 3 pairs of Siberians up for next year. I'm looking to bring in a couple of normal red poles, normal goldfinches as well. Later in the year, we'll see how that goes. And I've been toying really with the configuration of the Canary Room and the shed, and and how that works. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is the cages that I've got here. I've got 5 at the moment. Maybe doing something different with them. I'm looking at replacing the main cage blocks. Certainly this cage block here with some plastic cages. And I've used an all-wire cage, and we'll see that in a minute in Bird of the Week, to house the young goldfinch and the 2 young split pied red poles that I've got, and you know it's sort of slightly unorthodox, its positioning, but actually the sort of, you know, the wire cage is not a bad little addition to the Canary Room, and I'm mulling over some ideas of what I will do. Chris Harrison, who very kindly made a donation to the show, has also very kindly offered to help me with the cages. I'm not quite sure what help I'll be, Chris, but I really do appreciate that, mate. It's a very, very kind offer. So I'll no doubt be speaking to Chris over the months ahead. There are some wire cages there. I could, on this block here, where the young fifes are, there's 5 cages across at the moment. Potentially I could take the single off the end and put a stacked row of these wire cages. They might make good for, well, certainly make good for housing any British young, but also might make good for some muling. And that's a really nice little sort of interlude into what we're doing here now. So I have an agat hen that I put in. The Goldfinch cock sort of displayed, sang. I haven't seen them tread, but you know, he was very sort of very keen on her. He is in good breeding condition, very, very keen on her. She built a nest, and she laid a second egg this morning, so I've taken them away. She looks like she's going to lay a third, so hopefully that'll come tomorrow. She's broody enough, which is good. She's sort of sat on the pan now. She's quite territorial as well with the cock, so she's sort of chasing him away, although I did see him feed her early on, which is of course is a good sign. So be nice to get some mules, from them. Nice way to sort of finish the season, really. Which brings us on to the next part of the show. Now, I'm absolutely indebted to Dave Coughlan of Natives and Norwich, the Facebook page, for the next part of the show. And Dave messaged me a week or so ago and said, you know, would you be interested in you know, a little bit of a sort of narrative on mules? And you know, fascinated by mules. I've bred just the one mule so far in my bird keeping career, but you know, hopefully with the goldfinch there and the canary hen, you know, hopefully we'll get some mules out there. And then as I you know, as I sort of get more experienced with British over the course of the years to come, then hopefully I'll be able to really breed, you know, some really attractive mules. And so here we go. This is Dave Coughlan's guide to breeding mules. Hi, Dave Coughlan here. Following on from Matt's last episode in the Canary Room, there was a question about Matt taking muling further down the road, and so I said I'd write a few tips on muling from my experience with them. When muling, there are 2 things you must ask: what your aim is. Is it for exhibition or song? For song, most small canaries will do. Probably the best to use, Dave reckons, is a roller canary. But from the time the young mules are in the nest, they will learn the song they hear. So if you want to strike them correctly, it's best to remove any cock canaries from the shed. Might be a challenge here, Dave. The best singing mules are linnet and Goldfinch Mules, and should be trained every day with a CD or YouTube video of which cock was the sire. For mules for exhibition, only use yellow canaries, and full yellow greens are better again. With miniature mules, the smaller the better, so use Irish or Razor hens. For large mules, only a Norwich canary will do. Put your chosen mule pair together immediately after the molt. The sooner the better to form a bond. If there is some bickering, don't worry unless it's highly aggressive behaviour. The mule pair will stay together right up to March, and then Dave separates them for a month. When you reintroduce the pair, they should mate immediately if they were bonded. When the hen is building up, Put a cock canary in a small cage hanging from the breeder. The hen will squat and the Muelling finch will gladly do the deed. Dave has been concentrating on mutation mules of late, and he's going to do a quick rundown of the different Muelling finches. So first and foremost, Dave introduces the Goldfinch Mules. The Goldfinch usually only fills eggs from the start of May, when the black tip on his beak disappears. Here you can take a round of stray canaries in April. Let the Goldfinch back in when canaries are 10 days old. He should help to feed and will be ready to fill eggs second round. And we've got some pictures of 2 cock mules from a native Chevril finch and a Norwich hen. With Siskin mules, the one thing you have to watch with Siskins is they get fat in cages. So the oily seed has to be controlled. What Dave does with these is give them a month in a breeder with his Muelling hen, then a month in the flight to keep him fit. The Siskin will fill eggs in April, but you must shut him off last thing at night or he will break the eggs. When you set the clutch, slide him off and only let him back in when the chicks are 10 days. And there's some Norwich and Siskin mules bred, and a young 2020 pastel Siskin mule, and also a Raza Siskin mule. Red Bull Mules, and we've tried to do those in the Canary Room, and we will give them another bash. Red Bulls are very chummy and will bond with any hen. He should be ready to fill eggs with his Muelling hen the 3rd week of April. You can trust him not to break the eggs. They will even help incubate. The one drawback of Red Bull Mules, though, is you can get deformed chicks. But when they are right, they are lovely mules. Dave's bred them in miniature cinnamon, dark, large cinnamon, a gat cock. The miniature cinnamon that you can see on screen now won a lot on the bench, and the gat bred in 2019 was deformation free or deformity free, but his Isabel sister was born without a lower mandible. It's a lovely bird. Linnet mules, when in full condition, so linnets when in full condition will thread a fly, Dave says. I think that means that they can breed with anything and can be trusted not to break the eggs. Dave's bred some lovely dark and variegated miniatures, but for a few years he's had a golden linnet cock that produced a lot of big Norwich mules. The bird that you can see here has done a lot of winning on the bench and was a real showman, and we talked about that in our top tips about, you know, a bird showing itself well. Greenfinch mules are probably Dave's favourite. A good dark cobby one takes a lot of beating, but there's lots of scope to breed colours mules with all of the mutation greenfinches. The difference with the pair is fitness. The Muelling pairs already mentioned are okay in double breeders, but the Norwich and Greenies, being big birds, a flight cage is needed and the amount of food control. You can go Norwich cock to Greenie hen or Greenie cock to Norwich hen. Dave's bred them both ways. And we can see here a white greeny Norwich mule that he bred last year that got best current year mule or hybrid at Stafford. So really, really nice bird. Bullfinch mules, only the hen bully can mule or hybridize. Again, a flight cage is needed and they're hard to get, but a stunning mule. Crossbill mules, again, like greeny mules, you can go either way. Crossbill cock, Norwich hen, or Norwich cock, crossbill hen. The crossbill will come into condition even before the Norwich. Again, a flight cage needed. Dave says Irish exhibitor James Maloney has been breeding this mule in great numbers and was unbeaten, taking best mule or hybrid in all the top Irish shows last year. So well done to you, James. Twite mules, well, this is something I have some first-hand experience of. A really attractive mule and a cobby yellow cock off a Norwich is stunning. Sadly, I got a cobby buff hen. I did breed a yellow cock, but it didn't make it to the. It didn't make it away. Buntings cannot mule with canaries, but they can hybridize with each other. Here's a yellow hammer cock, and Dave's looking out for a reed bunting hen for him. He doesn't think the chaffinch or bramblefinches have ever muled with canary, but they're highly fertile with each other. And this is just a little bit of a hint and a tip really from Dave, which, you know, really appreciate. Got a blue Siskin mule that he's sent in here, and then the ultimate clear mule, the light green finch from UK exhibitor Terry McCracken. Terry, a well-known name to many. Hopefully you enjoyed that little bit of sort of background on mules. I know the mules fascinate me. and I look forward to breeding a few in the Canary Room over the next few years. So that's the end of the Red Pole Diaries. As I say, we'll keep everything crossed for them, and well, it's time now for Bird of the Week. Our first bird of the week, or it should be birds of the week, are two young split-pied redpolls. I think we've got a cock and a hen there. I'm not 100% certain, and I will, of course, I'll do a DNA, do some DNA testing on them. You can see using this this all-wire cage, and the redpolls they're picking up. There's a lot of interest in the soak seed. Very little interest now in the egg food, but very interested in the soak seed. I am giving them some pearl morbide as well, and a little bit of broccoli, which they've been pecking over. You know, I'm delighted to have these. You can see, well, you might not be able to see the rings on them because they are still covered in the plasters. So I've left the plasters on for now, but I will take them off at the when I put these in big flights. So really pleased to have these birds. I'll hopefully get a few more redpolls for the year ahead. But our first birds of the week are a couple of split-pied redpolls. Our second bird of the week is a Lutino Siberian goldfinch, and I'm, delighted to have bred this bird. I think it's the first goldfinch that ever hatched in the Canary Room, and to have taken it sort of to this stage, I'm really pleased with it. It's by no means concluded, and so we're not counting our goldfinches just yet. A lot can happen over the course of the coming weeks and months with it, and my hope is that in the cage that it's in, I haven't seen it eating the seed. I've seen the redpolls eating hard seed. I haven't seen the goldfinch eating the hard seed as yet. I've got two different seed mixes in there. I've got a Haith's Craker Tonic, and then I've got the Putter's Goldfinch mix in there. So I'm hopeful that it will continue to eat those, to eat that seed, and really sort of pick up. At the moment, it's enjoying soak seed. What I haven't done yet with it, but I will do, is start to give it some pinkies. It didn't get any. It didn't get any in the nest because it was reared by a canary. Now it was topped up by me. I was topping it up every couple of hours, and we've got it so far. It's by no means away. I think the pearl morbide though has really helped, because that's getting sort of a whole variety of vitamins and the likes in it, but it's also getting some moisture in it as well. So that's our second bird of the week, or technically our third bird of the week. It is a Lutino Siberian goldfinch. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, sort of looking at birds, the steadiness that you're looking for, moving around birds, and one of the important things is not to disregard any of your birds at this stage. All of the young birds here are still in nest feather. A few of them are starting to break into the moult, and you can start to get an idea of what they're going to look like. But getting rid of birds early is both, unfair on the birds, because the molt is quite a stressful time, and it can that can cause sort of fatality, and it's unfair on the sort of future owner, because the chances of them not being stressed out and not losing them are relatively small. So just very difficult to sort of exercise a degree of patience, because the idea that you've got a shed full of birds and you want to get rid of some is it's tempting to do that. And similarly, if you're desperately starting out or you want to get some birds, then it's hugely tempting to rush out and buy some, but do wait until the birds are being molted. Certainly from an exhibition point of view, you can't tell until the bird has finished the molt whether it's going to make the show team or not. And as I say, I've selected 25-30 birds so far, and with my experience over time, I anticipate that a number of those birds will make the show team, but there'll be some that I've selected that won't, and that's just part of the selection process. What I want to show you now is a couple of cinnamons. It's our first year with cinnamons, trying to rebuild a competitive cinnamon line. I've obviously I've done well on the show bench with every other colour, and I've won second best with cinnamons a few times. There's some good cinnamons and fawns around, and I don't know that this year will necessarily be my year. Although I want to show you what I think is a heavily variegated yellow cock. I think it's heavily variegated. It's definitely heavily variegated. I'm not certain if it's a cock or a hen. It's a yellow bird. The other one could be a very good coloured buff bird, and again, I'm not sure whether it's a cock or a hen as yet. I thought it was a cock. It'll be a cock or a hen, won't it? Let's be honest. But what I'll do is I'll show it you in the flight cage to start with, because it looks nothing in the flight cage, and then I'll catch it up and I'll pop it in one of the show cages for you to have a look at. So the two birds, the two cinnamons that we've just seen, are nestmates, and very different looking birds. I think the yellow is showing some potential, and it may end up making the show team, depending on how it works out. The other bird, which could be a buff, I say could be. They're out of a double yellow pairing, and it's got quite good colour on it. And it's nowhere near finished, so it looks to have a broader buff and feather than the yellow, but that could be a decent bird, a decent foundation bird, as we develop the cinnamon line moving forward. We've also got a four now, I think, carrier cocks. So we've got two visual cinnamons, or two cinnamons in the nest, although we haven't rung them, so we don't count them until they're away feeding themselves. We've got four visual cinnamons on the sticks, and we've got four carrier cocks that we've bred. So we have, assuming the birds off the white make it, we've got birds off, cinnamon birds off the three hens that we wanted to, and we've got two full eggs still in the nest, still to hatch. So I think I said it'd be nice to have 10 to select from. Well, we've got 10 at the moment, touch wood. So we'll see how we get on with those. Next time out, we'll have a look at at how the white chicks are looking. We've taken one away, that's being singled off over here. I like the way that looks, actually. I think that's a hen. I like the way that looks. So that's our cinnamons. Our whites we'll have a look at. Say it's really coming towards the end of the season, certainly with the canaries, and it's been an eventful one. It's been a successful one, and we've captured it all here on the Canary Room. I had a couple of messages about wondering when the series would be ending, and I hope that's not a "can't you just end this thing, Matt?" my plan for season 3 is to take us right the way through to the end of the show season, assuming that there is a show season here in the UK, in which case the sort of final episode will be early December of the show. So still plenty more to come. We are going back out on the road as lockdown is continually eased. We're going back out on the road at the end of July, beginning of August. So I've got 2 visits pretty much confirmed, and then September, October time, I hope to get back to see Julian in Julian's Canary Bird Room, and Steve and Bob, and see how they've got on over the year as well. So more to come. It's nearly the end of the show. It is time for question time. Thanks to everybody who has sent in questions to the show. I normally do a Facebook post to ask for questions and then get absolutely inundated with them, so I really do appreciate it. I was putting the edit together of episode 12 and I thought, oh, it's quite a short show this. I think it was 27 minutes, and then the other 22 minutes were questions from question time. So I've got a number of questions in. I will answer them all. I may answer some of them on Facebook. So one of the first questions in has come from Michael Burling, and has a great supporter of the show, and it's to do with record keeping. So Michael's question is: do you keep electronic records on a PC or in a book? What records do you keep? What information do you track? And for your breeding records, can you possibly show an example? I can, Michael, yeah, absolutely. I use a number of different things. So first and foremost, in the Canary Room, I use a diary, and what I do is, as a pair breeds, I make a note of the ring number, I make a note of the cock and the hen, and I put that in the book. And what I'll do at the end of the breeding season is, as I catch all the birds up, I'll put whether the colour of the bird in there, so whether it's a clear, whether it's a variegated, a cinnamon, a blue, etc, and then I will put on there whether it's a cock, so whether it's a yellow, a buff, and whether it's a cock or a hen. So I start to build that picture, and that record sort of goes, I've got diaries that go back over a number of years, and I've got an old tatty stock book in the garage that goes back about 10 years. But everything is then transported onto the computer of the birds that I keep. I only transfer the information on the birds that I keep. And then in terms of information, I collect their sort of grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather, and you can see that here. And then what I'll also do is make a note of the number of young that I've bred off each cockbird. I'll make a note of the number of young that the hens rear. I'll make a note of hens that have had sort of difficulty in rearing, and that will all form part of the view to which lines that we develop and which lines we move forward. What I'm very sort of passionate about is patience and giving birds time. Now, some of the lines are a second, or what I class as second year birds. So first year you do okay out of them, but second and third year is where they really come into their own. So the heavily variegated buff hen was a case in point. I think in the first year, I got 1, maybe 2 birds out of her. Now, it would have been really easy for me to have discarded her at that point and just said, oh, she's no good. I haven't got the volume out of her. But I really liked the quality of those birds, so I kept her. The second year, actually, I think I bred 5 5 or 6 different birds out of her, and then in her 3rd year I bred about 15 out of her. This is her 4th year, and there's 5 young. There would have been 8, but there's 5 young out of her in this year, and she's just out of shot now. She's feeding. So fertility, and then the number of birds I've kept, so as a percentage. So one of the things I'll look at is the clear buff cock that we've got in the Canary Room. I think I've bred 22 birds out of him so far this year. What I'll look at is the percentage of those I keep as well, Mike. So it is all about numbers. You can see a couple of the examples of the things I do, but you're looking at overall quality, and particularly if you're running a cock with multiple hens, you're looking to see, is there quality from all of the hens? And if there is, then you can say that the cock is throwing quality birds. If there isn't, then often it can be the hens that are throwing the real quality. Thanks for the question, mate. Much appreciated. Time for a couple more questions. The first one, or the next question I should say, questioning from Dave Coughlan. Cheers, Dave. View on double buff pairings and double yellow pairings. So if you double buff and 2 birds you had spare, and you pair the buff offspring back to yellows, will you get frosty yellows in the young? And the flip side of that, if you pair 2 yellow together, will the yellow young from these paired to buff throw high coloured buff offspring? Cheers, Dave, from Natives from Norwich. Really interesting question, Dave. Different, I know you keep a lot of Norwich. Different really in certainly in fifes, because actually one of the reasons people sort of double buff is to put feather on a bird, and these fifes have got decent feather in, but actually you want them to be small as possible. So more often than not, I avoid double buffs, apart from if it's maybe with a white. Double yellowing I have done. The cinnamons are all from double yellow pairings. The visual cinnamons are all for double yellow pairings. You can see, quite a good depth of colour. I think one of those might be a buff, and it's got really good colour on it, which is good. So double yellowing will bring the colour out, but can give the perception that the bird is a bit long, skinny and narrow, and double buffing, as you say, can really make the bird look a little bit frosty. Not so much of an issue in the fifes, but I know it would be in the Norwich and other birds like that. So not adverse to it. I'm not a big fan of double buffing, and I only double yellow. I did this year because I had a cinnamon yellow hen and I had a cinnamon yellow cock, so it was a kind of a necessity more than anything else, mate. We'll do another 3 or 4 questions, but I will answer the rest of them on Facebook. The next question then comes in from Gonzalo Muraldio. I hope I've got that right, Gonzalo. I reckon I've got the first bit right. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your surname. How do you prepare your hens and cocks for breeding? When do you start feeding soft food? And are your feeding regimes the same for both? Thank you. What a great question. Essentially, Gonzalo, I start the process for next year sort of now. So you want a nice sort of quick, good molt. You want to build energy. You want to build reserves in the birds. I knock soft food on the head around sort of September-ish time. And then I'll start it again after the show season, so beginning to mid-December. The conditioning is the tips really on conditioning are be consistent in what you do. So I give the birds apple cider vinegar once a week. I do that all year round. I give the birds Davy Gold Plus twice a week in the water. I do that all the year round. As I'm building them up, I'll start to add calcium in the water, calcium in the egg food, slow and steady. lighting, which brings me on to another question that we've had to the show. So thank you very much for that question. Lighting plays a huge part. So Neil Cox has come in there. My lighting setup, Neil, is from the Bird Room company. So it's I've got a 4 or 5 foot daylight tube in here. I've got the shed, the room is lined with white UPVC, so it's quite bright. I've got a big window and a big door with a big window in it, so I get a fair amount of natural light in here as well. So lighting plays a big key part really to the conditioning of the birds. So you know, consider that, but it's gradual. Gonzalo, it's absolutely gradual. There's nothing worse than throwing a load of, you know, egg food, green food, soak seed at the birds, and you'll snap them into condition, and they won't be. For me, it's just about bringing them in gradually. So last few questions now, quick fire. From Tammy Leanne, is it possible to have a pair breed one more time this summer? It depends where you are in the world, Tammy. Yes, it is. It's getting very late now. I know the boarders have been picking up. They maybe want to go to nest again. I don't think I'm going to put a pan in for them. So it does depend where you are in the world. But what you want to avoid is birds going into a molt as they've got young in the nest. Oliver Crowther says, the Canary Room podcast. God, Oliver, don't you think there's enough of me? Possibly. But who knows? Let's not rule it out. Brian Lahori, when is your book coming out? Well, thanks, Brian. I am still writing the book, so I've not finished writing it yet. I am self-publishing it, which means that I'll have to pay for all the printing. So when I've got to a point where I know what cost it's likely to be, then I will put out for pre-orders. So stay tuned to that. I think it's probably going to be about 240 odd pages. So hopefully it will be a decent read. From Charlie, how can a newbie into the fancy tell the difference between a border and a fife? Really good question, Charlie. Size, generally, although some borders are small and some fifes are huge. Size and shape. You know, the border is a slightly different shape to the fife, but the border, you know, is or should be considerably bigger than the fife. Thanks everyone for your questions. All we've got time for on today's show. Thanks everyone for your comments, for sharing the channel, and please keep it up. You know, our subscribers on YouTube are growing by the week, which is brilliant for the hobby. Really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit subscribe. There's a bell button as well. Hit that and you'll get a notification. Shows come out every other Sunday at 9 a.m. UK time. If you are able to, and thanks to everyone who has donated to the show, it has meant the world to me in what are really difficult times across the globe. If you're able to, hit the donate button. Until next time, everyone, take care.